Thabkhe kondo na chi de wo de chi te chi me da de da da accommodation. I did comment. Oh yeah, Lord, good.
Andro de again la.
Oh, yeah, good. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh, good. Oh yeah. Thomas, what are you? Where's that? Yeah, it was us. Well, I want to do some different shit.
Good morning, Gen Rinpoche. Tashi delay.
Boy, just a
Good morning, Katrina.
welcome.
translating for us. Just a reminder for people online, we have an opportunity to express our gratitude both to Ginla as well as to Katrina for her translations. And you'll find information about those offerings in the chat box. Please have a look. And if you could get them to us by the 29th, that would be most appreciated. And so we'll begin this morning with some prayers to focus our mind.
To the teacher and darkness and the destroyer, one that is gone, for destroyer, complete and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, nor the world supreme God, beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans to you, the Buddha and darkness and the destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When I was supreme among the humans, you were born on this earth, you paid 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, feel the merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field, endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame, a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning on clouds, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing, subdue the faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your true body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Iram Guru Rana Mandalakam Nirtayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentients. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Ta tik som gen la.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Maneti bakasar. Oh yeah, tia. Chitunga bachimbe sonlega. Teve tendi ishin role lasa. Tida nyeba tari samshi inse. Nye kan jigla namge lo danda. Chidi samshi jigden chawa kwa. Dumba Chawa Shindo, Tokyo, Nani Zenkundo, Nibulan Baku. Nanju Naja Yamle Tetarche, Tando Chechen, Tishin Changsalos, or she Sumbatar. And Marazu Tanda, Top Debe, Milidi Sungora, Devet and Dish, Churubala, Dalshin Komba. Churubalia, Gagin Sambata Tre. Rabatandanga, Yawaita, Dabata, you Tago, Cheme Satan, Chuyana, Kage Hako Metunge, Kuban of Tindil Makiviche, Kanga Chinyan, Hako Tumge, Shentunge, Lando Chinje Tunge, Getiwara, Ote Diko Kasura. Did the Milute, the vet and the Ishin Ole Las. Ishingi Norbus, Tangi Mosusha Dawa, Chirimbuchi, Rivachi, the chick. Sanjay said out and they were much better than they rich, no really rich. And telepa to a Chidata, Tendesha, and the Tabashaya. Can say similar to the pass or Malam Tamna. And it said the second name so but Tezukanga Shitan Bezucham Chimba, Sinjin Dudu years ago, I sing you know, says your name. Oh, what you sing you know, would they? Sendelia, second name so a caraco natezo, so atamna. And then Babazu should I say Mogoba Lindy do what they want to with this. Yinaya, Tenjoji Milu Degi, Tesa Mayimbarwa, Kawachima, Yason to make your Hadami Copa Pans again the Tene, call it Tade, Simja Tamji to Sanji Coba Toyala Soba. Today love Chimbeton to do a race and Arajan Milu Ditene. Roa, Tende, Arajan Milindi, Ishingi Novo. Taton Timbu Mambo Legend is like when Milusi to she Lola Las. Or teaching at the Hako got a Sungura Tabu, or teaching them the mountain.
So here, as Lama Tsongkhapa has said, this body of leisure, more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, is found but once. Though difficult to obtain again, it finishes as quickly as lightning in the sky. Having reflected in this way, realizing that all worldly activities are like winnowed chaff, you must take its essence day and night. The perfect guru, the perfect guru, practice in this way, you who am seeking liberation should do likewise. So here, what we have right now in this body of leisure and endowments, we have something that is so very precious. We have the kind of circumstances, as in the freedom to be able to practice the Dharma. And not only that, we have the kind of, we have met with the teachings and we have the capacity to understand them. We aren't in a place where we are subject to stupidity or we're not able to understand this. We have all of these conditions right now. And the kind of body, the kind of life that we have taken is more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. Now here, this is a sort of an antiquated example in some ways, but this is the example that is given because a wish-fulfilling jewel, some kind of special gem, it even could have been something that was like the relics from a previous Buddha, and using that to make some kind of ornamentation, so you put it on a particular figure, and by making sincere requests to that jewel, you're able to, without any kind of difficulty, attain the needs of this life, whether that is food or clothing or shelter, in a kind of spontaneous way without a great deal of effort. So a wish-fulfilling jewel is something that has that capacity. If you make those kind of sincere requests to it, it could provide the sort of things that you need in this life. But the kind of life, the kind of body and life that we have right now far surpasses that, right? It's something that is so precious in terms of we're not able to accomplish just the needs needs of this life without any difficulty spontaneously. But we are able to, on this basis, avoid being born in the lower realms in the future. We have the ability to secure rebirth as a human or a god and continue in that kind of chain of taking good rebirths to practice, to pursue this path and develop realizations in ourselves such that we are able to proceed to the state of Buddhahood or liberation and enlightenment. So when we think about it, we should understand, we should really have a felt sense of how precious this life is. It's more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, than thousands of those, even millions of those, in terms of what it can give to us, what it can bring.
Oh yeah. Tina Narazu Miludi Tachimbu Tindeji Ina Tingarazu Samlu Kurgi Omares and Gora, Tom Shavi Omares. Karesana Miludindeji Nebatalia, Katsun Dabasidachi, Tatare Kukabiabushi, Ital Maji, Tandul Maji, Miliki, Minane, Tetsukanga Hakotumge, Ya Sanji Tambadaji, Tinde Kukab Sambuchi Chungaresa. Mili de Sachim Shivaji in some Samukayo Maresugara. Or Teleco Mili de Niebala Kawa Kayo Mare Tele Pesha Pesha Sura Pesha Sura Pesha Sankatu Pesha Takasura Komuchi Tondachi Niesona Tebe Kadara Chunva Tini Tis such a Yomaresugara. Tangone Chana de Mili de Sendi Chiputanda Kalasaya to look at the Mezike Tira. Tichibutandalia, Susan Mizete, so Toya Chibutandalia. Any legacy, Chetesha, Mato, Telelagwetunda, Kanachi Matuna, Pepambores, Gora. Pepambores. In a te Pansim Kakeo Maresa, Milu del Pansim Kakeo Mares. Telepesha, there was a Tonda Chis Lasuna. The mother Porsona, oh, Tapesa, Susatanga Pesha. Tola Chinsu Samje, Pansim Shukshabuchires, Garanzo Mili de Tawas Tunda Meva, Doa, send the Chibuta das Ora, Mado, Shanda Meva, Tia, could send it on Dalia Tigbara Sa, Doa, Chawanga Bakarilis, Penjo to get in the Kariche, couldn't say something. What in this yet it was such and the pay Pambores. Ina Garanzo tell her Pansimta, Nivala Kasokayam Everest. Michi Danka Samlina Tideshi or Resogora, or Tender Rongumaras, Disashim Shivsere, Disola Mata Sogora, Yatisla.
So even though the life that we have is so precious, we have all of these kind of good conditions, like we don't actually see it as such. We don't recognize it or think about it in that way. I mean, we have been born in a situation where we're not, say, a hungry ghost. We don't have to deal with the difficulties of being born an animal. We aren't in a place where we don't have the Dharma, and we don't lack the capacity to be able to understand this. So we have all of these amazing conditions gathered, but we don't really have a sense of how precious it is. We don't really feel joy in that or actually understand it. Like most people say, if they were offered like $1,000, they would say like, "Ooh," they'd be very excited. They'd be so happy, like, "Ooh, how do I get this $1,000?" And they have a sense of joy in that, like, "Oh, that's something great." But when we think about it, do we have that same sense about the life that we have right now? So our life, most of our life, really, we spend taking care of the necessities to sustain ourselves, feeding ourselves, clothing ourselves, and so forth. But if we only do that, we don't pursue anything more than that, that's such a great loss. Like if we don't use this life for anything more than just taking care of our everyday needs, sustaining our body over the course of this life, it's really something that's a great loss. We should have a sense of like, wow, that's such a sad thing. But we don't, again, really have that kind of a feeling about it. But if we were to say lose $1,000, we would have that sense of loss. Like, I can't believe I lost that money. Like I wasted this thing. But if we use our life just kind of however, we don't think about it, we're not doing anything in terms of Dharma or for the future, we don't have that same sense of it being a loss, like a lost opportunity. We do things that are non-virtuous for the sake of getting money, right? right? Thinking that that's somehow justified. But again, it's really showing in general, this is the way that people think, that they feel joy in something like money, but they don't have that same feeling of joy or recognition of the preciousness of their own life. And they don't have the feeling of loss when they don't use it for something really good.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the condition. The Dani Batari, some she million de Toya de Lela, Shiviche, Maritasa. Around the Kawa Tom, a long Saturday, the Masha, Nyawaki, Yida, Tondo, Lantigan, Chitang, Razo Kwako, Tedusa, Tandabato, million and Yaga, Samba, Chachin, La Soba, Koe, Pusum Soba, condition at the Sama, Pusum Soba, Kawa Sangbo, Lam, Manua Chia, Measure. Hala Soba, the Kawai, Kawa Sangbo, did Malan Seve, Kawa Chicken, Sambala, this. Going away in a Yawa Tondula Sobota, Tunget Semiban Yongi, two a day, did young Manus have a Tunget Semiban Yang, this and Gora, Tandabatu Sigora. The Indizako, Tanda Pisum Soba, Milu Yabu, Tempata, Jayata, Ocho to be Gangatan again, Milu de, Tarin Toba Nashi, Tandi, Tare, Tanda Dembachi Chego, Tandabatu Bed Milu, Sangi Mambo Shivijala, your Tanda get to your Mareson Gora. Tanda Caresena, Chicken Chima Penje, Rimne Qua Corme Guach. Tabung Yason Yawala Soba, Tandula Soba, Kimbe Gugachi. So on a Kimbe Gugachi, I had a middle Tanduna Andrea. Or Tina Neja had a military led on Yumo Beshawan to Chenes, Kishila Rameba. Tunge Mamboch and Yongo Yore. Chanduda Nyawa Tazula de Yapure, the Yina, Tunge Mambuchi, Nazungu Sum Tugura. Jaganashila Sopadan, Devachat, and Mineva Medeva Todu Baba, Sambanashi, Tunge Mambuchi Yara. Oh, Tinduka Soda. Tunge di Manu Chawa Meva, Chaman Yore, Tawan di Manu Chawa Meva, Chaman Yores. Tatare, Koala Kembu at the best. Give it under Love Chambuchi to wear Yores, Miluditane. Kawashima, Yasona Kembu, Hada Mi, Kawapaji. Saru Tania, Dredge Soyara. Tene Koala Kichi Chembegoge. Sosola Rawan Meva, Ledan Yamogoange Rawan Meva, Pungun Dolin Chembeguach. Koa Koas Litera. Doa Reef to the Nyawa Yida Tondu Milasoba Tezola. Rawan Meva Pumbuchilang, Te Tidurician, Yati Doria, Shendazilla, Tusun do Dadla Koroasigora. Ledan Yamo Beshawan the Juni. Kichi na chik du kyu den doa menda wala korte yora. Oh, tindu ka soda. Tende de da menge ju sotu ba shaware. Ra. A te ranchi bu kwa le tarwa cha maimba. Susu tsendi pama nyende la soba simjen kanga. Kichi pene ngoma shimba mato susu tsendi pama nyenyi tu. Ani tobo tomo ra pugu putu la soba. Kande chebo chi na te dabu gyurma nyoge simjen chiyo yo ma re chera. Kisipyono ngomashire mado kyongamanga zumbinde sikeyena teka ji patekara madekara nyenye do kara sinde chiyo de chi chande tanda ngara ju ti yayi to rote hikide ina ke ngoge singmar ke sorge marwa tim basora mado sige ti tri me batan jawa me batan mare sigora samaranda jawa yenge chari kisipyono ngomashine ta tanda de tere tanda de cheso ya chen de pama ganga chesare Nido da Pubu Kari in a Shimata Trito in a King Washaki or Marongondo Shingina, and toss to young Twashi Ungra, any Chiaki or Mara. Or Tin Ducasoda. Simjan Tamje, Soso Sendi Pamada. Chidana Simjan Samade Pama Imbek of the Maimbek of Tamje, the Sosolia Assumption, Tin Chambore. Chidan Cabarachase. Chiso Koran Chikichilia, Robache, Chikichil, Chikichil, Robache, Sodan. Shimbe Shinga the Dias, Tozos, Simbuka Langas, Kangas, and Mazuya Todayora. Or Tende in Ducasoda. Tezo Tehane Tonda. Simjan Tamja Sosichibu members, Simja Tamja to Genge. Kangas, you then couldn't you Sanja Jacoban to Sanandi, Soso Madu Madu to your esse. Says on this message. Te tanda chimbo shibu chi tuju yo de se. O tezu tuba chidu pechu che wo de sa re sungara. Ya ta mang tu de cha so.
Yes. So here, if we recognize the preciousness of this life, but have the sense of, oh, this is something that is easy to get. Well, this isn't easy to get. As it says here, it's found but once. And we have taken countless rebirths. We have gone through all of the lower realms. We've been born as a hungry ghost and as a hell being, as an animal and so forth. We have experienced all of those kinds of sufferings. And so too, we have taken countless rebirths wherein we experience the kind of excellent things of the upper realms, being born as gods like Brahma or Indra, and enjoying all of the various excellent things they have in those realms. So on the bad side, there's not a single sort of suffering experience of the lower realms that we have not previously experienced up until now, again, having taken countless rebirths. And so too, we have in this sort of cycle of samsara, we have met with all kinds of excellent conditions as well. But really, we haven't been able to accomplish the Dharma. We have at this moment a kind of life with the freedoms, and we have met with the Dharma. But up until now, we haven't really been able to accomplish much. We have this special situation right now in which we can ensure that there is no need to take a birth in the lower realms in the future, and that we can continue to, in succession, gain good rebirths. And so, again, when we think about this kind of situation of samsara, and samsara is really taking rebirth, taking up and casting off aggregates due to being under the control of karma and the afflictions. And so when we are driven, when we are under the control of karma and the afflictions, we are going to cycle, sometimes going up, sometimes experiencing the very most excellent things. There's not a single one of those we haven't enjoyed. And sometimes experiencing the various sufferings of samsara, all of the various sufferings of the lower realms. And so here we have in this life the opportunity to avoid any such rebirth in the lower realms, but take rebirth in succession as a human or a god. And even beyond that, we can try to attain a state wherein there is no need to take rebirth in that kind of uncontrolled manner. In this situation of samsara, where you take up various aggregates and cast them off due to the being under the control of karma and the afflictions. And so here, if we are able to pursue this kind of a path, we can get to a point where we don't have to continue in that cycle, where we are freed from the control of our karma and afflictions, and thereby no longer take rebirth uncontrollably in samsara. And so here, going beyond that, we look at our own situation, and then we see that all other sentient beings are in this same kind of situation. Other than the fact that we don't recognize it, there's not a single one of those beings who hasn't acted as like our kind mother or father, or dear friend, like a child to us. We have taken countless rebirths, and the fact that we have moved to different rebirths means that we might not recognize the beings around us as the ways that they have acted towards us in the past. But it is a fact that we have had that kind of familiarity, that kind of closeness with every single being. And we look around those, those that are around us now, and we might not have that feeling because we don't recognize them as such, right? But if we recognize them, if we could see them in that capacity, we would feel that sort of affection. And so thinking in this way, we try to recognize the kindness of all sentient beings in that fact that they have been the objects of our affection. They have shown us directly great kindness in previous rebirths. But we can also reflect upon the special kindness of all sentient beings here in the kind of interdependent world in which we live. We are dependent upon the kindness of others for all of the things that we need and enjoy, those that sew our clothes, those that make our roads, those that grow our food. And so when we recognize that, when we see the special kindness of all sentient beings, our dependence upon them, and the kindness that they have shown us in the past, we want to do something to be able to help them with their suffering. We have a concern for that, and therefore give rise to this kind of aspiration to become a being who has the capacity to be of most benefit to all sentient beings. Other than our not having practiced the path to Buddhahood, it's not that we are not able to do this. It's not that it is not possible to become a Buddha. So we should think in this way, striving to attain the state of perfect, complete enlightenment, one who has abandoned all faults and attained all good qualities, in order to benefit all of these sentient beings.
Oh yeah. 당아라도 가서래. 파말라 소바 쳇딜이야. 전에 파마년데다 치치를 짜와요 바다. 전에 남밀라 소바 치치를 짜와요 바다. 아니 전에 진짜 개발이잖아요. 담불이 지속하는데 치치를 때네. 그러와 현다 틀을 때는 소소 속고 같이. 소수치 부치기야 초대게 되려 말아. 진짜 개발이잖아요. 그라. 담불을 전에 고 가셔 신가도 가셔 도로서 가셔 강박이 지속하는 펜터에 지체되어라. 근데 틀을 때는 속고라 서서. 사태 지속하는 지질 때인데요. 전부 인바. 소소 년대기 전에 저예배 전에 나한테 매나고 지질 펜터에 뭐지 나중에 좀 조고야라. 삼로마다 하는 맞듯이. 다 상승이 지체되는 그 미치고 속도. 어디 지다마 세시어래 나베트다마 디나네 치기 티시래 나한테 땡겨봐 라레 셴바 치지주스 거기서래 소소레 셴바 상마데 소소 깨와라 계획 맞아서 상마랑 그 교를 했어요래 텔레 가고 치그래 라레 셴바 상마가와 교리그래 펜도 말 펜도지세데 랑니레 달렌지 치진 펜도게 될 교스그래 시어가 콜 가고 치겨라 다시 더 코스에데 도선 다음 다시 가서 구주여 버려야 돼. 또 삼기와래. 대산되지나. 점불이 다가서 가라서 소벌에 소지 아버지 때네. 미지의 영자 다가서 전에 몇개씩 가서 밤샤 가지고지 지기도 와. 그 다가서 다가게 말아 거기. 미치서 나돌고 미수세 통내 되기도 와. 밤브지 샤 다가 가지고지 지기도 와. 아주 야고지 손들에 서대네. 미지 톱자고자리 용체제 수세네 처음에 그 수세네 개발용 말에 심지 탐제세세나시 줄로메다르지네 그메다 특상 수준의 개메라 지 밤레사 지지데 어떻게 코스에 잡아라지 계획 맞잖아 라니 깨어라 계획 맞잖아 팬토가 되시와라 그 된다버지도 삼겨와 계획 맞잖아 때로전에 되기도 안 되면 시디제 되기라 지게 지도자 가지고 주체 손들에 소되는 미 진정배스는 밤샤 뒤치진 담에다 세도가 뒤치네 안에 가서 내 투였습니다 와서 그 알레 주고 내려지네 지전 내가 맞아 주고 내나 배도가 이래도 어디도 가서 오라 네가 저기 삼로탄 하고 투여지도라 어떻게 개버려서 초고야지 지게질이야 전부다 세워셔야 지 30년 봐 초고야지 이래도 간중과 주체 배사도나 시지 현다세지나 내가 전부 되도 가서 뛰대 다 겨치마 파다 마도 줄세데 가중의 숨들하고 제게요 말아 겨가시 유나 어느 뒤요래 겨가시 매나 천디께 코란 좋아심배나 어디 용약해요 말아 겨가매 파다 마도 치마도세요 말아 어디 야 뒤질라면 tambo.
So here, when it comes to our mother, our father of this life, our friends, our loved ones, we can recognize their kindness to us in this life, right? We have that sort of familiarity and kindness and we feel that sort of affection for them. But we can also think about sort of in society, the special kindness of others, in that our very existence, our subsistence is dependent on the kindness of others. So here, even if they're not like intentionally trying to benefit you, it's the work of others that allows us to live, right? The crops that they plant or the things that they create and so forth. And so when we come to actually contemplate this, we can directly establish this for ourselves, right? Like when we when we actually take the time to look at it, we can see how it is that there is this sort of special kindness of others and learn to recognize that. So here, there's a sort of a lower philosophical schools called the Vaibhashikas that have a particular way of sort of presenting things. I'm a little bit confused about this, but here, in general, when we say that like something is the cause of something else, when we are talking about causality, we have a sense of there being a substantial cause and the sort of coordinating conditions. And when we can look at it in that way, like the sort of others are not the cause of us, right? But we are dependent upon them. And when we recognize as well that if someone sort of doesn't act as an obstacle to us, then really they're benefiting us, whether they are intentionally trying to do that or not. And this is really dependent upon recognizing them. I mean, we each have our own sort of separate continua, right? We have our own minds. We are sentient living beings. And we shouldn't, again, recognizing we don't know where we will go in the future. And we don't recognize, say, those that have shown us kindness in the past. We shouldn't take the things of this very life, like say our differences in terms of religion and or other things, to just sort of indiscriminately drop bombs or go and we have situations where people go in and just kill people at random. And so when we look at the way that sometimes people act within society, it is based upon sort of not seeing the personhood or the sentience of others, sort of going around as if others were nothing, as if they had no sentience. They're just sort of like sticks or stones. And if we treat others in that way, we are neglecting. I mean, for those that don't accept that there are future lives, then the mother and father of this life, we're not going to be able to trace those into future lives, of course. But if we do accept that there's a continuum of consciousness, we are going to have relationships with all of these various beings. We shouldn't treat them as like inanimate objects.
Oh yeah. Tate kya chima ngachi yusade. Tate samlutan je kuri ba samlutan mado ta singusum de tenje o mardo. Te kare se tinga zo pendre chi shane pena. Pena ngazo chilo ge chinshin da meto da te zo maboche doa. Tu ba maboche doa. Meto da chi na ko chi kya ke. Chunjo gane ya ke ni meto share ni ya so da chi. Do da chunjo tinde le. Kashe come to Chilo Lamatu come to Yanti Sando Chianiako, Sunday Benny Yanti, Dabra Chiash and Dasiki, Yachindoa, Titinko Tondo Medua, Kanga Chiki, Toma, when the Cadine Leo, when the Titus and Yurgi, Samsal, Sachi, Samsal, Toche, Samsal, Sayatoya Chando, Damada says a good Junji Dedoa. Koran one egg meadow, the Degmar, the Tina, Shendo Konate, Koyan Juni, could Junji Dedoa. Sishin Nazela Sobatazuina. Otindo Garazo Luda Semyana Lutea, Koshash de Metatana, Kotor, Tuchi, Gondoa, Tashash, Toda Sata Tindasandura, Luke till the Jurche, Kashatosha to the Yogoda. Was a Punjab Toba, Demdukashina Tosa, Palang Gorade, Pet Tochan. Go the Torah Palang, going Mungus to Tochayo. And Shendon so on the Turk, the Torah Chad, Shendon Tombutus today, Yoga. Two to the call you do and what you then can't let some time shadow, some river, something Torah, children, you do that. She duration to what you could take the dream, Madame Dashik, or tea in the garage, Lutico. Luda sem machine to the Luda sem Yakalendura. Ludig sem tension Hadura. Ludig sem tension Matura. Lugna Yuba such a melon to the Kangage. Niba Yamdun, any tension, any call Lute, Lu Korachi, Roshara. Some de Koyante the Kagachi, some de Tudu Trubamara. Ludi Tudu Tugara. Call Teletensi, ever the Kobe, Tumenge, Ro, says it now, Ranshi. Oh, Kojiya, Sir, don't the Chicago said to me, Marazu Chilo Mobula Yungudua, Janshin of the Dina Kanga said to me, I said, Kashi Shabushida said to her, or Tina she just said, and she says it. Then the Kokoraya joined in Dogar, Luda, me, Luda, Dawasa, mean, Dushi, that sent in our Kanga Chedura. Tako some Tamo, she said, Nando Shakchu to the Haguda. Shakchu to Luda, the subject dropper, Namunas and Mabas, so said, Same the dead day or the same Medua. Dead day or a little to Shana Susan and some the Hako Medua. Some the day or the Penavation uses Selma says she day or a Yakalegally so Tambush in the chairs doa. So called Sheba de Missile motion the pan drone, Luta some Yakalashi. Some Kora the Yakorachi, me now a Kanga Num the Achi, now the Shamilam 1,000 drone, so wish and Dachida, Devachani Kawalangi. Lei Yong said, I led to Yingo, I led less than Kudakin, or Tindiwang Chiguara, or Tindukasura. Quintus and do years order. Kawachima sem de Quintin do yuna. Tanda me in be some danshi, then do your mara, Kasha de Samlukoda, or Kawachima cover a source of someone, they led the sem de Tenio mara some good Tiro. Led the yard, the Sheba de Tamuches and wrote the thing as a make Tongio mara. The Kaga seems to Shebe Guindi Doshaguare. Ribachiman Samjus and Garazo Genes on the Tanda, but Sheba Chick, you reach it in Rodera. Tanda in the Koya, you Baruchel Luda, Dosha, now I can't go in the Gucci Sheba Tamuch Shanduara. Secondo Yoda. What in this in the quadra, but to good was it. Joachima Yuna. Yang Jawangama Shebe Kundingama Yogora. Tina Tande Shebati Shebangama Chilton Yongora, Jawangama Yote. And the to do that in the Tugura Tanda Chibakimatabe Ribati Ribangama Latin Chungurese. Tingama Ribangama the song dese. Chaja Riba in the Kora Sheba Delia Sheba Koranga Ju to do a Bayenge Chuchan Yongora. So what the duty drove so that Pame Kudala so what duty drove a chief Yongora. Sheba the duty drove a marity, the Koyan Koran, Yungamachi, ten Yongres. Tip Mayas and Mare, Pies and Mare Severa. Koran Koran, Shebe Kuji, and Tina Sema Shudu, Resevera, Garland. Oh, T in the Carsoda. Kawangama Yoba de Ripatile. Nielegi Kuchi that she yogo, the Telekuchi Mane Yongumaris. Take you the Pada Maya Semaris, Ligi Judy Pamekudare, Semi Judy, some Koreantina, she should send us you go, this water. Utina Jennifer sent to the Luton Draw to the Ansem Korapadu. Or Tenders to the Kyoangachi Yuna, and then some jet of the Padua Marituba that she chill and draw you the Vatiko took to Inibara, Tanga Kyo, Kyo Sanga Yomara. Joangama Zumbiski and Pamachi Yavatasha and this Yavatasha. Tingama Tandul Kiba in Akadina Yodara. O Tendesi de Nichoangachi Yavasira. In a Kasha Joangachi Matonati, and I done the killing mess at the Yungudua. O Kemalina degree. Inayako Joangachi Yavashishan. Karasugo said, Tibapan Kewa Truse. Send the message, the Yabuches message, yes. Shanla Choma, Shambada Seve, message care for the S. Or take any send the message that the Yabuches on the George Madel, Yabu Young is. The choices send the lang ambassadors, Chima didn't debut to Young is Tisha Yora. Message that the Shura, Chendelia. Shambada Sawada, Shanla Sawapang, but a pendosia, Tindisan message carrying. Message the message, was carrying, should the timbers carrying. This send the Kiba, then Debunami, Debudani, Shamaki, Shamadala, that's somebody younger. Oh, that mountain was your teacher.
So, here, when it comes to like understanding the kindness and the way in which we depend upon others, that's something that we can really directly establish. But when it comes to establishing past and future lives, this is something that we actually have to think about the kind of reasoning here. We have to use our faculties in order to examine and establish this for ourselves. So here, when we look at the external material world, things like a flower or a bush or a tree, we see how there is a continuum to that kind of material, right? A material thing. So if you have a flower, it's produced and that flower might wilt away, but then there's a sort of seed there that's left over, and that seed you plant. Now, not every sort of particle or atom of that physical matter is going to go into the next one. Some will go into becoming the earth, right? Or becoming stones and so forth. But we can see how there is a continuity of particles or of atoms, like our body as well. I mean, even as we grow and develop, it's not as though the materials, I mean, certain materials go to like being the flesh and bones of our body, but those are constantly changing. And it's not as though when we have those kinds of changes in that material, it's somehow lost. It changes state. It might go to something else. Sometimes, I mean, we can see, like, depending upon what we do with our body, there are some bodies where the sort of particles, atoms of it may become like fossilized, you could see, or someone is buried and then that becomes something where you can see a tree grow there or something like that. But we can see how it is that the material things of the world have a sort of continuity. They are not just cut off. And so when it comes to like our body, sometimes these the particles, atoms of material things are our flesh and blood and bones. But when it comes to the time wherein those physical conditions can no longer act as a support for mind, the body becomes a corpse, right? But when we think about, well, what happens with the mind is not materially established. It's not substantially established. It's something that is clear and knowing. It's sort of like almost like a microscope or something where we're able to turn it toward and it various appearances come about. And we can also recognize that there are different levels of our consciousness, right? So there's more coarse levels, but when we say undergo something like surgery, those coarse levels of consciousness subside, and there's only a very subtle sort of mind that continues on, but those more coarse consciousnesses can arise again. So when we see this kind of continuity of consciousness, we can recognize how it is that consciousness is something in which it depends upon a previous moment of consciousness. We can have a kind of connection with a particular life, right? We have a perception, oh, I'm a human right now, but that isn't, that kind of coarser level of consciousness is not going to continue on into the next life. And so when we think about the kind of consciousness that we have, this is something that it connects one moment to the next. It comes from a previous moment of consciousness and continues into the next moment. But there is this continuum, this continuity, and it's not something that is visual or material, but it is different. It is consciousness. And so when we think about like those times of death, for example, the more coarse consciousnesses will subside, all of those appearances of external objects and so forth, but there's a very subtle consciousness that continues on, again, moment to moment to moment, that acts as the substantial earth for the next moment of consciousness. And if we recognize that really, when we look at this continuity, it is going to continue even beyond the point at which this body ends being a proper support for that. So when we think about the way that a human develops, the kind of continuity of their body is dependent upon those particles, those atoms of the ovum and sperm coming together. But it's not as though the consciousness of that child is going to come from the parent's consciousness, right? That has to come from a previous continuum of consciousness. And so the substantial cause, we can talk about, again, a substantial cause and coordinating conditions. The body acts as a coordinating condition for taking a life, but the substantial cause of mind has to be a previous moment of mind. And so if we can establish that that continuity will go into the future, using this kind of reasoning, really thinking through this and ascertaining it for ourselves, then we have to accept that there are not only future lives, but also past lives. And if we see that there have been infinite past lives, we can know that all sentient beings have acted towards us with great kindness. So, for some people, they might look at this and say, well, this is something I can't see. I can't see it directly, and so I'm not going to accept that. But I think it would be wise, just considering, to place the sort of skepticism on the side of, well, maybe there are future lives. And so the way that I live my life now is something in which I should maybe take into consideration the possibility of a future. If we act in this life, if we sort of sustain and take care of ourselves in a way in which we are ethical, in which we abandon harming others, and we try to benefit them as much as we can, we're going to be happier in this life, but we're also going to experience those ripening results in the future. So, I mean, really, the practice of ethics is something that will lead to our being happier in this life, but also giving us good results that come in the future. And that's something where it's really important for us to establish for ourselves. And it's not something we can see directly, but thinking through it, the way in which the continuity of our consciousness works, and it helps us to understand past and future lives.
Oh yeah, that's the so that. Tanda dako chendelia dewa yung chima penjela penye lunga yusum yu chobati yabuchewole tichode siwara. Tanda chendela. Che chu disha yana dewe si kasi umarenje kemana dugudwa. Shenla chawa bangbata shenla pemba juba nina dewe shere. Shenla chawa bangya mambu yorto. Tezu changma de chode yora. Shenla pemba juba pendo jachimbu mambu chaya yora. Pendo mambu chaya yora. Chambada nyeji shenju chimba chudin sebala soba. Tezu changma chora. Tinyan dindra. Shenju simsina shenyi pendo chide kungudwa. Simsina tamze kidonda samla tangudwa. Kati indi ka soda. Tongbani komsena. Nga se rawa de shibush samla tang. Ni tra ni se shibush rawa de samla tang. Tindachi yo marita se chira tambo nga rawa namju sambana se nga tindachi yo marita se. Nga se de pumbu nga la tenne pata wa sambana nga sha. Tezu chawa che de la nga chawa che se mato. Ti nalo le shu dengere ji pumbu le loso. Takpa chibu chiruba se ana se takpa chibu rawa tindachi yo marita se de. Chakdang jesa ki namju jesa tong jesa nga se rawa namju nga ju sambana se wa mara. Nga mese ki wa mara yore. Tenchen rebar chunga chidi yore. Pumbu nga bola tenchen tetan rel ne. Ene telia taasa taane. Ene penne cheba ta tungye nyongya da tewa nyongya chi yungudwa. O tere, te sonda. Teta bude yo mara tongba nye shena taharwa. Trasi de rawa de truba yo ma. Nyes de rawa truba. Susu tokwe pa samlo tangdang wange yungu yo de se. Che tamze tongba nye sedi zambe. Nyamo go tsawa de pa che tanda. Shenla neba yongsa. Tsawa de pa che tanda she yo ra. Tende che ganga tsu de shena. Gachi chu mambu yo de. Shenla tsawa pambo da pemba truba nina la dewe ishe ra. Ota de che ku yo de se go ra. Mesi ke nante. Di chungna ne chewa chima de la pen tegre. Chewa chima dewe tabdi tere su go ra. Mege wale tungye kun se da. Tishin nyandu tamze do shenla tsawa che na. Tungye sangma da nga son kiawa doha kanga liga shera. Kele tenro tamze da namba kundu tiwala. Kiawa saba yane tenro kiawa sambu da namba kundu tene tewa ke kyoti yungre shera. Tina diyo dhuwa. O ti indi nga razu mechi de pe ke chimbo yabu shibu chire ti pe chu yabu chibu desi. Ti daga se chendi chibu tondal sochu. Tina chendi tondal tuwe tendo Shen le cawa tang neba jie mang ta shi jie qi ne, jiwa ji mo de rang le dong e nyo e ge xi li ru rwa. Di yin di ka su de, di le su su qi wu de si wa da. Di nga zu di, jun jun da le yu gu tuwa. Di de dewa nye jo ne, da ge ge gong ma xie na si. Di de dewa chu zhuwe li ding ke bar shen le jamba de zawa pen do zhuwe dang, cawa pan ya de lab jing ge sam lu sang bu tang ya gu gab di de tang shen ge cha du zang, di de sang lu ma dang na si go da. Di de dewa nye jo ne, da ge ge gong ma xie na. Di le lu ba shen me den, di le mong ba shen me do si. Da rang ge rang lu ba de da si. 다들 그거 야부 시부지 야부 럽진기 내가 지사 삼바 삼보 지사 초아 방사 진짜 밀려 야부지 토그래 디디 던데 덴바시네 교화 때도 대회 탑이야 만도네 마마 두르타야 내가 전에 말이라 소소소 펑버라 일에 몽바 셴베데 다 국봉원에 몽바 티티를 다시 거라 티교 응아시 던데 삼루타나 제 삼루도 코야도가 세대 제부스 소소해야 되네 저도게서 삼루타나네 삼루데 자추중으로 와 미카제 니마레레레 칼라사 티상마도 겨 마부 삼로 타마싱게 요라 방아주 릉부르 타나 겨 로자스 테그리치 티보도 삼로 타가시라 타가르지네 두어도 티에 당마르 티네 티네 카두 존소 쇼샤 어디엔도 가쇼라 어다 돈다 메시데 돈다 덴바 셰셰 티체오레세 티송으로 야 티질람나 마운트마드미시
So, therefore, here, when we think about doing the Dharma, this is something that, again, will make us happier in terms of how we live in the present life, as well as benefiting us in the future. So, really, the practice of Dharma can be subsumed, as we've seen earlier in this text, as Nagarjuna has explained, into these two things: abandoning harming others, getting rid of that entirely, and working to benefit them. And when we think about the kind of extensive practices that are contained within those, we can see how things like benefiting others could be through generosity or through developing love and compassion. But even something like the teachings on emptiness, when we have an understanding of the way in which we grasp at there being some kind of an autonomous, really truly existent I, and like our enemy, our friend, we hold them as if they were really in and of themselves a friend or an enemy. We have a sense of them being sort of like there's something that is in control of the aggregates, this self, this thing that is maybe permanent, unitary, autonomous. We have a kind of a feeling of that, and we recognize it doesn't exist in that way. The way that I hold this kind of I to sort of have control over the aggregates or be the one that exists in this way that isn't dependent upon anything else. When we come to recognize that there is no such self, this lessens the kind of grasping at enemy and friend and the sort of actions negative that we do based upon that. And so it's not, though, that in those teachings we are saying that there's no self whatsoever, but there is a self that is merely dependently designated on this basis, on these aggregates. And on that basis, we engage in acts that are helpful and harmful. We create karma that we are going to experience the results of in the future. So even the teaching on emptiness is really something that is subsumed within this idea of benefiting others and abandoning harm to them. That's the whole of the Dharma. And really, we are trying to get at the root of that, this grasping at an I, grasping at a self that is the way in which is what drives us to act in ways that are harmful to others, that prevent us from benefiting them. And so when we understand this, we can recognize that like following the teachings of the Dharma is a method for achieving happiness, right? We have heard it said earlier, again, in this text, that all of our suffering comes from non-virtue. All of the kind of bad things that we experience are a result of the non-virtues that we have engaged in. We suffer now and we experience the suffering results again in the future. And the cause of happiness, the cause of our benefit in the future is this is engaging in virtue. And we really recognize the importance of that when we come to understand that this life is precious and important. And along with that, have this sense of an understanding of past and future lives. That if you act negatively, not only are you creating harm in the present, but you are creating the causes for your future suffering. And so with this, when we have a sort of recognition of this is a precious life. This is a really precious opportunity in this continuum of rebirths that I'm going to have to take. If we fail to take advantage of this, here Shanti Deva has a verse that says something along the lines of like, while I'm in this sort of happy state, if I fail to use it for my benefit, what could be a greater deception than this? What could be greater stupidity than this? When we think about past and future lives and really have a sense of that, we see the importance of the life that we have. We see the importance of how we are acting and taking accountability for that. And I mean, we see that there are some beings that are only able to think about today. Like some humans, all they can think about is what am I going to eat today? What am I going to have for today? We see some that maybe are able to plan for the course of their life. Like, what am I going to do in these 100 years? But when we expand our perspective by really understanding that there are past and future lives, and this life is just a moment, but it is something that is an incredibly precious moment, then we are really motivated to act in accordance with karma.
Oh yeah. Oh, that got relation. Word. Oh, that on the Karsoda. Yobale. Yeshi Chen Tanda Yeshe Kemalana. Mes love to Yomara. Oh, Kasha Susumatona, maybe never Yomara. Namdina Lingutwa. Maton Chena meva mes, ne maton Chena mes, Tilavio Maricere. Then a mix ever making on this day in the Tua Chujuchi, Beg Tua Chujuchi, and the Tua Tungemara. Then a Mimisa, Tua Chung Meton Shinshera. The Niman as a Niman Dawa doesn't have Kanda Yaka Haku Yamara. That is such a chin chichi Haku Edua. Nimatende orders in the Yichige Marwa, or Tis or the Chile. Yeshi man, so never man Matona, Tanda Hakumaso, sing killing mess in the Dura, never killing his as a Yomara, Titandeki Yomara. The check came Melina at Tanda. Shanna saw upon Chini Pemba to get Michigan. The chair there. Conacha came Melina, chicken Shababu Yomara, teacher killing me. Ya Joangachi Hakumaso teach check Melina. Shanley saw upon Chini. 야, 신이 디펜더 중에 미시나. 고쳐게 랭게 오마데 고쳐지게 어래. 쳐세든 딜 개월에서 거라. 냐와이다 전돌에서 뭐 진행 년발 미동게. 대화 용게 야 짐버싱게 딜 쳐서 거라. 점게 딜 쳐서 거라. 기타테들 되어라. 신라 사와 방바나 진이 펜버 투가 되더라. 다 같이 좀만 보용 거라. 어디 인도 가서라. 코디 쇼체네 Joachima Mena, Cotora, Kepedua. Church to the Sendelia, Kipsa, Ranki, Shanti, Chiso, Tebo Yungura, Yaga Yungura. And Joachima did, they would not mean Telesa, Young years ago, Tico, Kiran, Joangachi Kemalina, Young Yoda, Young Day, Yona, Yawu, Mena, Jora, Omara, Kisamato, Jora, Omara. Chamba come Sawa, come Sava, come Chambi, and Message, and Suzuki. Kondo ngaji trado and dancing sandalia never share. This is social media, mimiki sociara. So Kuchora came to a Tanga Karsigorasana. Sawa said, Church said, social Jiganship Apoda, Tata, Kawangaji, the Kemalana. Shana Tapa, Temper to Samba Sambuchi, Chiso Pendon, the teacher, Church Kemalana, Churchigara. And Kajate, social. Pama number is Chuchi Sasha, Tibashi, Chibashana, Chuke Legio, the Chuchi, Tibashi Sigara, or the Indicar soda. That's all Colonel Raleigh Dua, some Legachana Raleigh Dua. Moya, teach Lamnia.
So here we should really, if we can't say accept that there are past and future lives, and we're going to sort of leave it open, better to err on the side that there are past and future lives. And even if we can't yet accept that there are past and future lives, we can't assert that there aren't past and future lives. We can say that we don't accept yet that there are past and future lives, but to just say, oh, that doesn't exist because I don't see it, is really a stupid kind of a premise. Dharmakirti talks about this in the Pramanavartika. Like, for example, in the past, they didn't have the microscopes that were able to see really small particles, small atoms. So is it the case that atoms don't exist because we can't see them? Is it the case, you know, that in previous generations, before we were able to see the sun or the moon up close, people would not have accepted like what they're actually composed of or what they actually looked like there. But is it that they didn't exist like that because you couldn't see it? So here, even if we can't find certainty yet, we're not at the point where we can say definitively, yes, there are past and future lives. We can't definitively say, no, there are not past and future lives. So we should leave it in this place of, well, there might be past and future lives. And so if we act in a way where we are abandoning harming others, where we are trying to benefit them, even if we don't accept the Dharma, you're doing the Dharma, right? The practice of Dharma is really about that, benefiting others and avoiding harming them in any way. Whether we accept that there are past or future lives, whether we accept the Dharma in a formal kind of way, if you act in that way, you are doing Dharma. And so even if we sort of are not sure that there are past and future lives, but we act in this way. We act ethically. We act based upon not hurting others when trying to benefit them, trying to develop love and compassion. There's no loss there, right? We are creating a happier world in the here and now. And whether or not we experience good results in the future, we're creating a kind of benefit that is in the present. Whereas if we give in to our anger, our attachment, our jealousy, our competitiveness, our hatred, we are more miserable in the present. We are creating more suffering for ourselves right now, let alone the kind of ripening results that might come. So here, even if one doesn't accept a creator or accept a self or accept the Dharma of Buddhists, to act in a way that is based upon not harming and benefiting others really is to do the Dharma. On the other hand, there are some who might say like, oh, I'm a Buddhist because my parents were Buddhists, but they don't actually act in that way. So this is sort of the opposite of this. They accept the Dharma on some level, but are really acting contrary to it, just doing harm. And that's the opposite of how we would want to be.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that don't know who got so that. Oh, church and Joa Chimang is only Jabia, right? Joang and Bal, Noida Tandula, so much as Hadam Village, Chetelia, Miki Wachupan, Kewachu to it at the other, Kibuchum, Shira, Telia Catcher Dosona, oh, Koala Yatini, Rawame Baya, Doadi to Ritu to Kichi Nechi to the Cormagoga, Rawameba. Le sa chatu sande ne rawa yo marwa le deburwa le masa kane sosuge le masa bata le sa bala jobache shakbache ne rawa doga majo uma juba kapsu rawa yo sangdwa kanse rawa juche tene ba se chana kawa do ma de chana rawa yo da se siduza ko le sa bo te masa bache kudi masa ne debude umarwa sa change to le shakbache takbache ne pa ne rawa yo se de doa sa kanga chesa de ne leg chinju kawai tana chil tangir mato titu rama ke yo marwa o ti indu ka sura o jo chamba nge du tung le cho be chu kibu chung chu shen le so pa ya ro me ko chu ko ne o teni kibu de ge che te le ya ko ye tung e pa ya do ri do ra la ra me ba pu bu do le che ko ba te le tar che te le mi ta ba Tamoda Tameba Tombani that it out Bangudo, Yamo Bangudo, Kondonga, Tradon, Decimal Sobat Sanga, so on a Banguara. Telelabo the Ranchibu, Rameba Pumbu Doleche, Guvekio de Letaro Metris, Chindi Pamala Soba Kadija Tazule Toshi, Pentongashi, Chevode Tazo, Teletra, Choku, some Kudoa. Then Chindi Pamashibu Mari, Simja Tamja around the Drawayode. Joangachi, you know, somewhere around the Drawayode. Nichito Kona, some Tambe in it, and then Cabaretas and some parts of Chichen Drawayode. Tiduki Drawayode. Or did Simja Tamje. 심지어 탐제 동엘에 잡아시도 랑글레가 채우고래 심지어 탐제 같은 다도 그래 니린 요 말에 출루 니린 요 말에 미리를 요 말에 심지어 임바참 대화들 동에 medebe 심지어 이나 콜 잠바다 쩨 장고를 마도 뒤장 먹어야지 요 말도 저와 요 말. 소소서 따면 다음에다 가려네 거고 소소서 기라 텔레테게 요 말아 어디 인도 가서 심지어 탐제시도 니린 쩨 맹게 Rida, Chulu, Chitege, Samche, Mardo. The Andola Dungamen de Vesambia in Basambi. Some around and drawing garage. Some around a Teddy Pama and Della Soba, so the Karichi in a Tinashima, you Vesambia, your Maresam. That under Kijipan and Wama Shazan, the Shati, the Ziora. The Dangole draw you and get some Hokoda, what did Kibuchimbi Church. Oh, didn't they run a Jew, Mabuchi or no? Oh, this summer. Sanjay Chumde de Subana said. Sibet Sumo Church lums. Quay to meet you a lambing air, Jamson Yon and Shingi, you take us a shaggy dasora. Nenny Kitchen number dance. Tishin Batumba, Sanjay Sama Langan de Carasana. Long door Janet ditch over the Tawayo at you did it, Tungayo at you did it. Landorgi Nell and Judo, then De Lanzer and Ditorzer Lamgat and Yeshul thank you, Dasungora. Tishin Batumba, Lamgat and get it. Chingende Sora Sosa Chago Resera. Kajanam Jaco so Sanje Zolo Lurk Shas and the Sanje Lia Lurk and Lapjason Timbato Shen Lurk and Yamakan Shan Jidin Chebabu Shaya Wanja Mesungora. Tiana Kokanga Yagosu, Mato Kashayaga Kashatu Yungumara. Or the Inducas, Sibe Songo Chilam Yendi Kijanam, Tishin Batumba, the Kajanam Jaco sauce. The Indian has a Sanje Sudo, Tangi dog and going in days. Shane Sushi Condi, so good job cheto with us. So kept to us with us. So my by the other doing on the social like way on us. Tea Judy sometimes get papa, Judy Atruna. And it's a target, many Tapsi and Dioma Suda. Tigans and Donald Sugiba. Castle. Dread don't charge messages. Oh, go don't charge messages. Need to talk with Shanapoma, the Chin Tabata Matroda. Dread don't get to do charge pass in the Mabas or Medusa, social lego together. Need to talk about your dead departures, you'll tear, which is a Persia Medusa. Need to talk about Shanapoma. Chin Tabata Matroda, soda. Oh, they do that in the summertime. The Manga saw. Oh, yeah. Oh, Tunda Tanju died and the Shinola didn't ever tell something. Niegan Jigla, Namgelo, and Sheda, you don't put there your mother, Tanda than the troops of Gura. Some Jibbe Shujera. So much she tend to thank some listeners could go to let your mother doesn't go. Tanda Bodo Chung, your mother, Mamba, your mother, Karachi would take mother soda. Narazu Tanda, you think Zambulina, you think Miss Somebody, Lord Jachin, on the chair, de Margo. Yamachua Kanga and dictate or say, share your mara, say Karachi would take some Lukuge Marile, Kotuge your mother, take Madrasi. Then Drona Sosu Kinshake mother, Mahomba the tyrant would tell us some Lutango the das. Cindy Chibul and Goko Tibasa Kayam Juma said to Dara. Oh, the Kasura. Not in the all the Kibuchung would drink that shampoo with some Lutaja. And is in bed. Tazokanga Toba Chagin, some tail under the shoulder, and then Yeshi to Sanjay Sumbanashi, Toba Samba combustion in Yagi, some cool set and the Samba shoes and do that. Oh, Tim Yamount to show, yeah.
So, Here, this practice of Dharma, by doing the Dharma in terms of taking up the practice of abandoning the 10 non-virtues, really abandoning harm and trying to benefit others, this protects us from rebirth in the lower realms. This is the kind of practice of a being of a small scope, based upon taking up ethical conduct, particularly of abandoning the 10 non-virtues. They are able to ensure that they don't get a bad rebirth in the future. But here, moving beyond that, seeing that all 6 types of beings within samsara are really, even in those sorts of good rebirths, are subject to this uncontrolled rebirth due to karma and the afflictions. And so cycling in samsara uncontrollably and wishing to be able to be freed from that. And it's interesting because this is the same kind of word, and usually we talk about this word autonomous in the sense of something to be negated. But Chandrakirti also refers to this in the entry to the middle way, where he talks about, I mean, we are in a situation where we are under the control of karma and our afflictions, but we have this autonomy, right? He uses this word of rawang, of like having autonomy or power over ourselves, in that we are the ones who are creating the causes, right? It's not like we experience causes that are done to us, but rather we are the ones that are continuously creating the causes whose results we will have to experience. And so we can, if we make an effort, gain freedom from this cycle of uncontrollably taking rebirth, in the sense that we have autonomy in what we choose to do, the actions that we choose to take, by meditating on selflessness, by meditating on emptiness, in order to remove the root of our afflictions, get rid of that entirely. Then we are able to attain a state that is free from that kind of uncontrollable rebirth due to karma and the afflictions. But again, as we've talked about, when we look at our family, our friends, our mother and our father of this life, we have a sense of wanting to repay their kindness, right? They have shown us great kindness, and we have that sort of affection, that feeling of closeness to them. And if there are past and future lives, if we really think about this, we can recognize that every single sentient being, we can't point to a single one who hasn't shown us this kind of kindness in the past. And based upon a recognition of their kindness, again, there's this sort of extraordinary kindness of society, in that we are dependent upon others for our very existence. But when we look beyond that to past and future lives, we can also see that every single being has acted as our most kind mother. There's not a single one, other than not recognizing it. We just have had that kind of relationship. And so that means that really we should care, we should be concerned with the suffering of other sentient beings, and view them as being equal in terms of being sentient beings, without the sort of distinctions of saying my race or my religion or these are my people, but having the kind of compassion that encompasses all, without any sort of boundaries or divisions, based upon their merely being sentient beings. We have moved through countless lives in the past, and they have all acted with great kindness towards us. And so recognizing that kind of situation and our desire to be of help to them, we ourselves need to take up the practice of the path. As the Buddha has said, and I'm not sure I'll get this sutra quote exactly right, but that I have taught the path for exhaustion of samsara, but you need to take up these teachings of the Tathagata. So it's not as though the Buddha is a savior in the sense of being like a creator who's able to just do this for you, but rather you need to take this up into practice. He has given the teachings on what is to be adopted and what is to be abandoned, but it is up to you to do. As another sutra quote says, that the Buddha can't just like sort of wash away your sins with water, your negativities, like take those away with his hand, and nor can he just give you his realizations, but rather by teaching this path, it's up to you. That's how he is a protector to all of sentient beings. And so here, when we recognize that kind of message, that the Buddha has given all of these instructions, but it is up to us to take them into practice, combined with a recognition of this precious human rebirth that we have right now, that is something that is found just once and it will not remain. It's sort of like a flash of lightning. This is something that is impermanent. I mean, we really tend to have this sense of like, well, but I'm not going to die, which is quite strange because every single person who has come in the past has died. Every single, like, there's no one that we can point to and say they didn't die. How are we going to be the one exception? And so when we think about it, if we actually contemplate, we can see, yes, we have to die, but it's not as though the continuum of our consciousness is just cut, we're gone, but rather we will continue on. And so what I do now matters. I have this in my hands, and going through the levels of thought of the being of small capacity, the being of middling capacity, and the being of great capacity, really coming to recognize that I want to as the Buddha taught, listen to these teachings, take them up into practice in order that I myself might become a Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Don't I just look at you should have been ba. Oh, so you should have been. They got showed us na. Oh, subject in the Dwaka, and you should have been the commando. Oh, did it. Suba number Jangbasa. Tamale Chanyam Jangur is that Gable Sugura. Mima Tamal Chanyam Jangur is. Thabkhe gave the Chibara, Tinashima, Chiso, Chikarina, Lumbaina, Rede, Karikanguna Tipa, number Jangures, Kashele, Tato Yabusi, Kashel, Tato Masha, Tindishaki, Marese, number Jangures, Chanyam Jangures, Tiridua. Oh, Tinitika should have so long. Me long so was so good, long never. Membata, Chick Governor of Tezo. Gourmet Tato Jingashi man getting there. Tungege Pongba, Banjo Pongba, so but in the Yala Yamba, Ombuma sound of a tender in Nasugura. Did I John said, or there's some Tamjalia? Did I John said, Come Satula Sobada, a little or Tezukanga, Kashel Marat, this Kakba Meba, Samal Yamba, Dandafa, Tato Churches, Yamba Lumbo, Lumbenal meet Jobacade and Tezukanga Yamba Taco, the Esungura. Yamba, Jersey, Kakba Meba, Top Yam Jersey, Top Yamba Jersey. Oh, did do meditation. Long harder never done, Ra. Ningu Meji, Ubu to Yala Yamba Tadaja, said and Komla Soba, Kakba Meba, Kasheli, Kasha Meba to the Meba. Yamba Jersey, or teach Lamna.
So then turning to the text, and we are on verse 320, and if we look at what this is in the subjects in the outline, in Jeffrey Hopkins' translation, he's called it equal maintenance. You could say like sustaining all equally. So it comes in verse 320 where it says, the blind, sick, and downtrodden, the homeless, impoverished, and crippled should all without trouble equally obtain food and drink. And so here he's saying that all in society should be equally cared for. It's not as though the king should just care for some and then not look after others, but really in particular those who are subject to sickness or being blind, those who are poor, lack material resources. You should equally sort of care for them in a continuous kind of a way. So here, those who might be suffering from some sort of sickness, or they lack a protector, they are bereft of material possessions, they need food and drink and so forth, you should equally care for those, make sure that they equally get what they need.
No, Tadisara, Tashiba, Sholuga, Nishachidra, oh, Nishachidra, Shiba Kashira. Don't Menewa, Yang Chiso, Songhase. That's also Nabutato Chequeba to Lumbe Mimainge, and Lumba Shanda Milakanga Yobarishina, but the Zola Tato Chequede at the Redwa. Oh, take us on Dosana. Shundan Tondo Menewa, Ra, and then Shundan Tondo Menewa. To that about Shundangi, Shundan Killa Salas over order. Shundangi Jabukola Salas over Nabu Rawach and the Meduga today in Ayasi, Lumba Shanda, Missivara. Shundan Tondo Menewa, Jabu Shenyu, Nan Namla Ase, Kebu Shendago Lumbola never Tezulaya. Jesus Sumari Kibata, Chiripani Rabdu Jus, or Consola Tadoche, Jesus Sone Kanga Yubaka Robachi Gurese. Kebu Shengi Yuna never Namlaya, never Chi, Jesus Sumari Ki, Kilas. And then, Kibata. Ne Shendo Kewas, Chiriba, Rabdu Jus, oh, teach you Lapsania.
So then the next verse in our outline is providing even for those who do not seek it. And here in this translation that we have, it has it slightly different from the way that Gyaltsab is commenting on this. So here, the part that's been translated in verse 321 as Dharma practitioners, that is actually sort of like an address to the king. He is calling him the one with Dharma. And so he says to the one with Dharma, support in an appropriate manner those who do not seek aid, and even support those who are living in the kingdoms of others. So really this is talking about in general those that are in the kingdom of others, that even those who don't seek from you, or they're not looking to you for their subsistence, those that are in living in the countries of other kings, as much as you are able to, you should also take care of them, like sending others to provide aid and so forth as much as you are able to.
Oh, yeah, Ngaba subject natal chidwa. Ngaba shipe na ko sa pambo. Ta lewa chi leche betinde ko etinde ora kebuke. Pulombo ta tinde ko etusura. Pe na ko. Pambo ke lena lega chinge na so ko etira. Pe na ko dil shido tina ne. Cheben ko cheji ko ta do chinge chidwa. Ane kala tokwa shicha. Ma bu ko yache. Nyerbala soba ko yache. Kashestwa. Oh, Shido, Tatina, Tambo de Tambo Gares and the Chebenko Asset. Shologa, some Sony dera. Chebenko Asa. Chegi Shine Tamjedo, and a Chegor now, Mewa. Chegoro now, Mewa, or you said it. And you say, Keshe, shooting back to da. Teda namla mene koyose otande dikire. Karso dosuna zula kangla sobe cheji shini sigdwa. Cheji shini tamje dose. Chushi sigra. Zula kangba da che tato che maboyora. Tele cheji shi sigra. Shi chaya se. Chisore chini mimayne shi chasa skora. Cheji shini kumba de china retu de china. Tele shi chaya ke zula kang dang chi saya toya da yanyu desa de zukura. Oh, 대조를 따도 생겨질 수도. 최기 신의 탐제도 최고로 나오면 와서 최기 신의 탐제. 죽라 강라 속에 최기 신의 탐제도 최고르게 나오네. 가시네. 요메바라 메와다 노르다 콜라 속에 미셈바다 아르다. 또 정말 따도 신게 아버지 거고래서 좋아. 아니 남미체 메게 섭소 신게 거라. 노르다 콜라 속발라 미셈바. 잘라라 따고 야고 잡게서 잘라 간주마주 털라 다야다. 근데 털라 두문도 때세 따고 야고 잡도 거라. 지금 마 따고 야고 맞아 노르 셈보 잘라라 셈보시라. 벤조라 속발 간주마주 당신들 말을 섭소지 당거라. 노르다 콜라 속발라 미셈바다. 코르레가 징게투돌라 셈보스는 미디바 송게 미디 셈보 쇼스도스라 마데바 송게 솔세스 셈보스라 근데 잘라라 셈보스 tin 놀론줄 셈보스 그 컨주머주 페이지 치고도 시메버스서 톨라탄스가 셔라 디소라 최기신의 탐제도 최기 메바라 마예와다 노르나 콜라소바 메셈바다 ane chavala keshi tizu lega chidan keba koresi chutemba tana chagin balan ya chagin balan Don't simjala soba to Oma Shosa the Chitata Chit in the Yungura, Tezola Kotado Yabuchi would say. Kuzole Tasaya the Kangata to the Kora. That's it. Shaji La Balaya jealous, Namla. Many but don't know question. Tatanda, the Sangmal and Norjala Tola Matoke, Mikangalia, Sambu Mesunge, Kangata Tumbu and Kanga Legacy to get today. Yabu question is on good. Yeah, didn't do that.
So the next, fifth, we turn to the way of appointing ministers. And so for those that are at Dharma sites, they appoint ministers. Those that are sort of policy experts, we could say, then how to appoint military advisors, and then appointing treasurers and so forth. So beginning with the first of those, this comes in verse 322, where it says, for every Dharma site, appoint officials of the Dharma who are energetic, free of greed, knowledgeable, pious, and who will not hinder those practicing there. So here, when it comes to those who care for Dharma sites, and again, this sort of literal word is like a foundation for the Dharma. So you could have this with like a retreat center or a Dharma place where you have the temple and places for eating, and even the sort of food and everything that goes along with that is all part of that sort of Dharma site, right? And so one should appoint a minister or an official who is able to be kind of undistracted. Here it says like not lazy, so they're energetic, and they aren't sort of wasteful, one could say, with wealth, with the people that are around and so forth. This is really getting at they're taking good care of things. This word that's used here could be sort of referring to someone who's easily disturbed, right? But it's also sort of using possessions and things in a haphazard kind of a way, just however it might be. So it should be someone who takes good care of the things that they have there, their wealth and so forth, is knowledgeable regarding various activities, acts harmoniously with the Dharma, all the way down to like even at the smallest sort of whatever kinds of conditions there are for the support of the monastery. We could think about, or a Dharma site, I should say. In the past, they might have kept cows to be able to have milk and so forth. One should not harm even down to the cows. One should be, as it says here, will not hinder those practicing there, but will not hinder or cause harm to any of the sort of beings who are within that Dharma site. So really, it's getting at, and this should be an official who is energetic, who is not wasteful with resources, and also treats them well, and also doesn't sort of cause any harm or at any of the levels of the working of that Dharma site.
Oh, yeah, that did it. You saw something about. Take out the dosana. You were colored towers, cut down get it, cable part of Geshe, Kama, Shangeri, Sarah, color tower, gosh. Miko Etandara. You were Lucy, Shurdan, then I jumps. What they call Legachidan, Chidan Chilu, the Shimbako, Resida. Lucy, Shurdan, then I jump. Church assembly engage Gora. And a million Jambeton gets a certain bit Gora. Sang Singing yes, Koran Changma, good you have not chick pig. Consumer Jumbe with Changma of Silapa Changma, Benjo to Kanga. Ning Medan say, Changmala Ning Yabo, Timbuko Yara. Sule Pakashel, Tambuja, Kashel, Kabuja, Magash, and my engage. Jingum de Shikoyara. You resign. Je put some sauce. Je sambo, and lago kanga put some sauce again. And the curry does. Shawa soe, lumbocos, laga kanga chial, sobotone, Yawacha, the subscription singer to Lumboco. The Lumbocata get it quiet to her. The Debanalate or Jidangi Lusheba, Jidangi ko, Chitanchi Lukanga, Lumbo and Jingu Kashi to the ocean. Kebu Shanda Tumba, Kebu Shanda, Lumboso and Drawacha Wara, Shandala, Lumbayan, Kebu Tungan, Tell a Norchunse, there are some sort of Tessulam Buar of the Tarn of the Chadar of the Pugur Eshara, Joyabu at the Sura. Sidi Cheba than Jebala Soba, Tasa, Siba, Ara, the Cheba than Jeba Tachi, Sis, Donyagichido, Kaki Koyata Pachi, to the Sigua to say, Soba Kevascura, Chumimba, Mishiba, Chumimba, Chudam, Timberleg, Missing Squad, Kanga, Tambu Temba Yabuchin. Chudan Dembe, Kiabula, Yingyawa, Kora Chug assembly, Chuda Timbelega Madam Missing, Kiabulia, Tinjosing, Yingyabo, Nina Kabuyange, Randugi, Timameva, Kora Randuche, Kiabuka, the Tindel Matevicha, Kora Randuche, and she get in the Sendigu Mare, Kiabuka, the 25 Legashora. Sashi, Kurbala Yingyawa. Kurban Samal and Yin Yabu Yin Sawadan, Champi on the Patato Singeriquara, Kondu South in the Silbemere. Komidawa dance, Kondu Medache, Dri Sawada, Namji Pusun Sobadan Demba, Shamda, Shebe, Shambucha Sola Shambucha, Thoughts Yakundam, Tsubu Tango, Tsubu Attention, Assembly, Chamji Inaya, Panam, you didn't dream my son, the singing school yada. Lumbu Chu Kundejico, that they target in the Kuyunga, or attended to no Lumbu Coco de Yeshe. Tibetan.
So then the next verse is 323, which deals with sort of policy experts or those who are going to be giving, we could say ministers in general, giving advice to the king. And so here it reads, appoint as ministers policy experts who are pious, polite, and pure, devoted, courageous, of good family, ethically outstanding, and grateful. So here, when it comes to those that the king is appointing as ministers, they should be aware of the ways of the world, right? They should understand the sort of connections with other kings, building harmony with other kings, knowing how to make offerings when that's sort of appropriate, and implement various policies. And all of this is done within the context of their being based in the Dharma, right? They're acting in ways that don't contradict the Dharma, so therefore they're pious, and they feel a kind of and they act politely in terms of the way that they comport themselves with others. And here it says that they should as well, again, be knowledgeable about how to carry out the kind of policies of the king, how to do distribution of things, how to sort of implement policies, and feel even a kind of we could say maybe respect instead of fear toward the king. But they feel sort of close to the king. So I think that's what's being translated as devoted, and pure being as well. So pure then is not having any sort of even stain, even smell of their own interest. They act in a way that is pure. So thinking about like someone who has clean hands, when we speak about in politics, they're not getting their hands dirty doing things they shouldn't be doing. That's what's really meant by pure. And then being devoted as well to the sort of those that are around them and the populace at large. Now here, courageous, what has been translated as courageous in the Gyaltsab commentary is really saying not angry, not the kind of person that gives rise to anger, and of a good family and ethically outstanding, as in they abide in this kind of code of excellent ethics. And sort of they should as well, and here it says grateful, but have a kind of understanding of who are your allies and who are your enemies, recalling to act kindly towards those who have done well by you, and maybe also remembering what others have not have done that is not so good.
No, yeah, somebody got it. You step there, 내가 숨바 막고 거서 다들 숨바 막고 거도 막게 pombo 거야 막고 거 개부 손자라 단단데 동배 뭐야 동배 전부 거야 말이지나 동배 마차 너를 잘라려고 시다 현재 전부 매게 거 되는 거 잘랄 때에 영국 꼭사로 손지라 그거 사야 배샤 세션 걸어서 년가요라 그래서 동배 체지당 거라고 집어다야 되는 가부여게 롱절이 시다 현재 전부 제제 배샤서 고사 사고 제고 산티데 매게 거 돼서 뒤에 그 배샤 뭐부터는 걸어서라 네 마차바나 저 빠와다 로고 전부 거래서래 아니 잠시 개불라 지난 파다도 미잡고 주부 멤버십 잠도하고 미참마파 디테 버리실 거라 개불라 닝녀 개불야 가부요 거래 개불 놀 멤버십 개불 규찰라서 속바 마도줄 따도 chen 배샤 배치오라 도저 멤버십 따다시 바도 간주마 주 털라당게 마모체 야 용다네 마미도줄라 칼라 용다티 멤버십 따다시 멤버십 찬야보시 거야 개별 노 멤버십 바다 현재 현재 로메토 현다지 배산데 대치체는 고셈 토동게 현다는 고고당도 소바럽던데 요튼데 저치치 가버뉴제 진del레 마다게 코라라 랑주톰데 소소 삼루탄 레가싱게 거라 현재 로메토과 현재 로토통게 고 삼루 규주당 메토보시 거라 삼루 템보시 거라 처음에 통화하시고 그래. 처음에 통화 그 라시제는 골라서 깨지 간주마 주셔라. 셈 것이네 깨지트는 그까지 강시하셔 년가 그래. 개변 그 처음에 통화 따도 봐요 봐. 따도 왜 봐요 된다 봐. 때 섭소 중부진 것이 고요하라. 소소 내가 해야 될때 섭소지 중부진 것이 고요하라. 봐요 봐. 최다 내배 마음을 것이서 최다 템배 최를 내게 막 못된다시 거고 그래서 된지서 야
So, then next, turning to verse 324, as this is a king, they have to appoint military advisors or generals, we could say. So appoint military advisors that are generous, unattached, heroic, polite, who properly use resources, are steadfast, always vigilant, and pious. So here, the first quality is that they should be generous, should be willing to give, and importantly also not be attached, be unattached to material things. It's good to have those that are in charge of the military not being too interested in money. They could otherwise be influenced by money or sort of led astray, cheated, and deceived by others. They should, of course, be heroic, having that kind of like courage and heroism, but also polite and really devoted to the king in the sense of feeling like being close to the king. And they should they should properly use resources, as in the resources that they are given for the keeping up of the military shouldn't be something where they go excessively, right? But they shouldn't also underdo it, wherein they are not giving their troops enough food, for example, or taking care of them well enough. They should be in a proper kind of way that they use their resources. And they should be steadfast, as in not able to be sort of influenced or led astray by others. And here where it says always vigilant, in Gyaltsabje's commentary, he glosses this as they should never drink alcohol and always be conscientious. So it's not good if your general gets drunk and starts saying all kinds of things to whoever it might be. So having a military advisor who avoids alcohol and is conscientious is a good thing, as well as abiding in the Dharma, one who is pious or really is grounded in a practice of the Dharma.
야 다들다 이슈장아 데려와쇼로가 데시바카 시다스 너르지 니르발라서고 잘라다보장게 니르바시와라 뭐 니르바스나 사야토네도 타보게 파페슈체다 냠시 캡시게테 nirva kuwa tishikara. Te kachi dosina, chöji nganzu zangla sosikdwa, chöji nganzu da chöda tumbachi kukyara, lega chingachi kora. Chöji nganzu kimba ina digri se lega chingachi nipa karkana. Chö jamba tansi, nganzu jamba yunga ko, min jambo rechi kukyara, mekan kondu tan chuchi namsa mechiga, she tsali teburi kechi she ne she teburi yungachi kukyara. Nganzu jamba tansi. Chö ki nganzu zangla so, tenshi tsukla la kebasi, oibere. Ane rangdu mebesi, rangdu mebesi kuware. Doba chenpo, Koran doba di kyang chegu, shenda kanga mari sige tindi chikuyo mare. Rangdu mebesi kuware. Mi rangdu chenpo dosikira, Koran tera imado shenda che ma nyingi tindi kuwa, keji kanga nye chudu che tindi singiri. Rangdu mebe, zangla si, zangma chikuyo. 내가 제가 정말 랑이 되버네 시제 소수 된다 섬당데 말이라 자와 소하다 내가 가르치는 길 소보신 게 있고 개발신 게 있고 최진은 저 장라 소스랑데 내가 장마 근데 소 내가 시 개발시고 전세 줄라 나 개발시 전세 봐 내가 가르치는 게 된다 된다 하고 하시고라 전세라 값수 봐봐 자와시바 내가 텔레 타주시에 가르치는 뒤던다 따다 하고 계실 거래서 시바나 내 개별 줄라라 개바다서 전시 줄라라 개바서더라 개별 내가 지나치로다 텐데 돌바 개바시고라 줄라라 개바다 자외 고림라 고림 개베 주데 내가 제 구름 당부 갈수 니버 갈때 따도시 그래서 세상 여보 시부스고라 수단데 마나 념시 개불라 닝녀와 스고라 게시셔데 춘데 념시니세 아랑 신앙 잠방 안주 잠바세서라 군민 잠부를 스고라 주부로 직식 토셔서로 된다며 잠바다 개름 나오네 너르게 Nyerwaso kwa mi tembaris kwa lo shida chunju chene kwa yang nyamyu shida yo mara lo chenji ya kwa ne ares oya teach love ne.
So then in the appointment of
Chodu
treasurers and so forth or other officials, so here it says, appoint as officials elders who behave in accord with the Dharma and are pure, who are skillful and know what to do, who are erudite, organized, impartial, and polite. So here the word that's being translated is like the caretakers of wealth and so forth. And so this word caretaker means the one that sort of looks over something, whether that's food or some sort of provisions, etc. And this caretaker of whatever sort of department it might be, even if they are a householder rather than like a monk, for example, they should be somebody who is behaving according with the Dharma, in accord with the Dharma. And here where it says pure, this is again not just that they act according to the Dharma, but they're not really caught up in their own concerns or their own aims. So being without their own desires, they are pure. And they sort of here repay kindnesses or sorry, they know what to do. They know what is the proper kind of action for whatever occasion it might be. And here they are also sort of erudite. They are knowledgeable in terms of like various sciences that are applicable to their job. They are also skilled or scholarly in terms of knowing how to do things. So organized, they get how to sort of what order things should be done in. And as well, they should have a kind of impartiality, being equanimous towards everyone, but also having a closeness with the king, being someone who is polite, sort of calm or reserved, you know, as opposed to someone that's really aggressive or kind of difficult to deal with. And it also suggests that they should be elders, as in if you appoint someone who is very young, they don't really have the experience.
Oh, yeah, done issue. So do the
Mm.
and direction it to dollars. That Yabu Horange, go Sunny Bay, you shall marry Nawari Renale. Karechi, the Karechimu, ten, and the direction, the Mazis, Parlav, Chelega Cheva to the Yabunya, and the Checo to buy Abushe, what is over. Direction it to Dale, Niji, Dungus, and the Chevores, and the Chevomara teacher, Karishavas, Kanganyani, Kunsun days. And got a sene church, she saw you, or church, she never did really. Legacy great and the Drosson great, or Dilly Degaset on the Redretonsia, Cabu Canan, we were there. Then we need you got to see Kiramba, Cabu Korango Sonko, the Eswara. The Kone Shagwa some Bitanya Bakos has some payuk Shadi or Maresere. Cabu Koran Darren, Karichik, do Karichik, Mado, did the Chego, did the Chidimaji, did the Chebe status of Wesora. Kone Shagwa some Micho and Darish and the Dala Cabu Niji, and Cabu Niji. Do I don't go by don't go see. Lego check where the chamber go to buy share you. Kunsa de Dutch ever send a chuggy she saw ye. Tango Kusin Shunsan Tom do shook. Ra go by check where the right. Chung said Tom the chose. Lego check where the type of Tom the steps at the death in the check where she. To she sena. Tadu number that's a tad do. She Kashakal number she go to the Dimitical attended to the she standard number of Sarah. Nan did some she. Oh, Nan Delia Pesha Dosonta and did some pee. Doesn't you to some other society to share me. Need you cut your chase or teach Luna?
Oh. So then next in verse 326, it's not as though the king can just appoint these various ministers and forget about it or not pay attention to what they are doing. But it says here, each month, listen to their reports of all income and expenses. Having listened, tell them all that should be done for the Dharma sites and so on. So here, when it comes to appointing ministers, the king should also stay connected with them, paying attention, like gathering them together every month in order to listen to the sort of state of things. How are things going? What is going on? And having listened to all of that, making recommendations, like if something needs to be reduced a little bit in terms of the expenses, we're adding a little bit more, whatever might need to be done, the king should, having listened to all of the advice of these ministers, then give them instructions regarding what it is that they should do.
Oh, yeah. Tiny she's up there. Oh, yeah. Can I send on the Buddha chairs? Alamarita the lesser. Church Geshe, children do so that Cabo Church Geshe, the church don't do much called the Esagora. Get out young yet, Cabo, get out you something, sometimes your mother said. Chowder, Chowder, de la Malaba, Takbada, or Penjola, so what in that Devichido, my image called Esara. Church it and down, Shana Pendo to get down. Kange Kanga say at a Pendo to it, Yeshe, Geshe can use some Mima, and there's some town mother. Tanga Keta Simple Chagre, Samsa, Onja Simple Yin Samsa, Roa. And it's a Chupu Chagre Samsa to do some mother say. Church Geshe, children do in Bechina, Segura, in Gudesa, Chagden, Chagwa de Bechu Mares, Chagden. And de la Malanas, Takwada, and it's a Penzola, so Tindesima. Can you send to Jebucha, and when I kiss it down with the Jebuda Chabada, tell a Shandu, you're my sister. Show them really get a young at nor saw it not to do shit to any man do this. Then remember Chizokona Pendo, Chidokona, Legacy Samsa, Chesa, what they say, what? Oh, to say, Kiki. Shake it into Imbecilsa. Send it to my Imbecilsa. 동행질래도 말라보고 동행 잘라 추부차야 많이 보지. 계시더니 신도 제부로 제 근데 전에 계시도 신도 제부 야부 연구를 해서 지난 신마다 sente니가랴. 텔레 신도 작발라 속에 전던 요나 대 마시데 년도 제부찬디 요로서 깨다 요야다 로 주잘라 사야다 근데 사무단 최단 bet은 버시나 아니 저 제마 동에 냐야 줄도 레서라 센델라게 야부 용마레서라 작발라 속에 전도 다 마시 마징년도 제부찬디 요라라서 야 틀었나.
So then turning to verse 327, it says, if you rule for the sake of Dharma and not for fame or out of desire, then it will have a most meaningful result. Otherwise, your rule will be disastrous. So here he's saying that you should rule for the sake of the Dharma. If instead you're pursuing your royal policy based upon thinking like, ooh, I'll get famous, I'll have a really good reputation, or oh, I'm so powerful, I can do whatever I want, or thinking like, I will get some wealth from this, I will gain somehow in that way. If one abandons those kind of motivations and instead is really grounded in ruling for the sake of the Dharma, then that will be a meaningful kind of a rule that will be beneficial. Otherwise, if one is pursuing royal policy or the way that you are acting is for the sake of just getting famous or just getting more possessions and wealth and power for yourself, those wrong reasons will lead you not only to suffer in this life, but so it's not a meaningful kind of a rule, but it becomes the cause for experiencing the result of the lower realms in the future. It's the cause of your future suffering.
Yeah, that did it. You but show me Yamsi, Drubala Lavasida. Oh, Niba, show me Yamsi, Drubala Yabatala, subject is Nidoa. Oh, Nikas, show Ngari, but the Manyabashi, Yakun Jinjusha Godes. Not a meba in the Sabbath to get to the Dokudes, Nisha. And it are Tambutalia, Ngari Minyamba la Labatalia, Nire, Tetan Java Kesherva. And then when a Minyamba could I need to Tatambo, Tedar, Tedar Geshe, Geshe Chunden to Tadi Topakuda. Oh, Jebusi can the children, the Bashi Sigdana, and the Geshe can't do Mare, Geshe coach. Mandega de la Tim says, Tarshan, the Sochibala Soba to Butango Rase. Sangboche Jangina, and it Geshe Jango Mendoasura. Oh, did Tobachido. Did that Geshe Chundendo Jena, Shan Sarchiva saw. Jebu looked and gave it is ora. Shan Sarchiva, Shan Sarmachina, and it Lumbena to Jashing Mambuchadura. Kumachapa to the power Yakos Machan, Kuma Mambucha, Chapa Mambucha. Timge Mambuchege Yungu Wasura. And the Shan Sarchiva saw Jebu Luda, gave it is. Geshe Geshe to Shan Serva Sochena. Geshe wants to Shan Serva Sochena, and it's Chunyam do was it. Chuda Timba Humara, Yambar Yua. Tini, Mingewara, Chamin Tini, Mangeva Che Yomar. Jabisi Kana, Nyamba Sarcho said, Tungete, Cheoras. Timazan Geshe Kantu Maris. Chuda Timba Chena, and it Geshe Kantu Yomarisura. Colasambush is when I joined the Simli Carcho, John Chumar was it. Didn't talk about Kyoto. Oh, Tinin Gag was an old thing, Gag Maris, like Yagura. Solgan is subjected. Miwan Tadan Jigdana, Pezel Pension, Tor Zubesa, Carcerasina. Miwan should burn a me on Bukabos and burn a the Tadan Jigdana Pezel, Pension Shigi, Marumba, Chigichilva, Marumba, Tatsa, Chick, Markapsi, Damanda Shea Yongora, Marumba, and the Mendic, but the Shea, Mambo Yongo Esgora. And then Miwan Tadan Jigdana, Pezel Pension, Tor Zubes, Marumba, she had to say, Pension Marumba. 제머로 같은데 제고야 용거래 시과라 시다르 켜게 계시다 쇼소 줘봐 드시 선세 아니 시다르 켜게 계시다 네 계시디 쇼던 틈바 간데 제고래스 디고드 셰기 선세 좀 예로 나서라 명화시 변에 다다 지대 폐쇄를 폐주 찍라 마룽바 제시 따르 주베 계시 냠바르 제바인 라세 시다르 폐쇄를 폐주 동주베서 따르 주베서도 따르 주베 시다르 켜게 계시다 최선교와 디신선세 다 계시다 쇼니부터 퉁도그래 네가 퉁톱그래 제톱그래 해서 되셔도 개버시 변은 지단 페이지 찍으려 머롱버 찍으래서 내가 밑에 버 찍으려 제 머롱 같은데 찍으래서 와라 따르 주베 계시 냠바 제바 인라서네 시다르 최기 계시다 최소 교로 명계와 때네 선시 제kul로다 개벌 꾸마시고래 계시다 최니들이 명양버셔 제요레스 내가 어디 야수고래 그도야 디선시야 디슬람
So then we turn next to the section that deals with instructions on the non-degeneration and development, and one could say of the Dharma. Now here, sometimes that's religion and sometimes understood more broadly. But here, then first we begin with putting forth the connection and then getting into the actual teaching. And this comes then in verse 328, where it's sort of, to preface this, the way it does in Gyaltsabje's commentary, there's the thought that someone might have that, well, isn't it the case that if you rule in a sort of dharmic way, that others will vanquish you, like they will do all sorts of things that come to like get rid of your kingdom, and so therefore, isn't it the case that the way that we rule as kings is always going to contradict the Dharma? And so they continue saying like, well, for the sake of the king, we have to do things like kill others and so forth. And so won't that cause the Dharma to degenerate? Aren't these two then contradictory? And therefore, how can one have both a sort of practice of Dharma and be a king? And so the verse then reads, King, hear how in this world where the one usually destroys the other, you can still have both the Dharma and a kingdom. So here, calling out to the king, although in general, in the world, it would seem that one sort of destroys the other, in the sense that we see the way in which countries act, or like kingdoms act, sort of disharmoniously, and causes the degeneration of their sort of having a dharmic rule. And so here he's encouraging the king to listen, saying, please listen to how ruling a kingdom and it being grounded in Dharma don't have to be contradictory. Although it is the case that often they seem to act in ways like we can think, for example, of how does one care for society when you have those that do harm to others? Like if you have robbers or bandits, how are you going to enforce punishments? Do you put them in jail? There are things that might be considered unsuitable to do according to the Dharma, but you think that you need to do in order to be sort of a king, that you're going to have to necessarily do inappropriate actions in order to preserve that. And so he's saying, listen to how these two can be compatible.
Oh yeah. 다시 담마의 subject. 니바 메냠시 주발라 라바서 최응아리버데 메냠시 사두 주발라 라바세지라. 텔레아니 니도아 제카레스네 최응아리 메냠발라 라바세. 나리버데 메냠발라 바. 나르메 사두 주발라 바 니체라. 다 담보라 니세 최응아리 메냠발라 바텔레 니고도 인델는 거 봐. 당고 지텐티 먹어서 다 담보테다 천대도잖아. 바탕부터 단 될거 봐. 대단 제외 꼴이 시작이라. 대다리 개보 Chöndendo chena shen tsar chöbala soba kebe ludan gela ase. Chönense chena ne shen tsar chöba sochene kebe ludan gegri basti mache nase. Kesi chedo shen soba sochena chön nyambar gyuru ase. Tingi minge war chamini su nyamnase. Tingi minge yona yo marese. Chöda timbada kesi tayete yung marese. Kesi le chöda metin belaga chego mamu yose. O tinde marese, tati dire dese. Karesne, miwan tadan jikden na sedwa. Miwan shin böne, reba timba. Miwan shin böne tadan jikden na pecher. Ane penjun chigi chigla. Marung bachi che chinse. Miwan tadan jikden na pecher penjun. Tor dübe se. Torsum chere simero. Chidar kyeje kesi da. Chösu gyuba tishin sunse. Kesi da. Tian chö da timba gyure di dire sa ase. Sambar zo sendo se. Ti kande se na. Miwa shi böne tadan jiden peche. Penju chigi chigla. Marung bar che chinse. Ane. Tinde lega la juba yibe sabri. Kesi nyambar cheba yula ase. Chiga chilinda bachen kesi nyamdo udwa. Chidare kesi na chösu gyura mengewa tene sönje chi kulo ase kumachara. Ya ti lakshana. Tambu di lakshana di dwa. Ni
Okay.
subject.
Yeah. So here, just going, I think, back through this verse again. Again, sort of the advice here is instructions or trainings on how to prevent the degeneration of practices that have already been established, and developing those that have been established, as well as then developing new. And so the first of these is preventing any kind of degeneration of previously existent practices. And here again, this transitional verse is the one in which it sort of presents this qualm that it would seem that there is some kind of contradiction between ruling a kingdom and that being grounded in the Dharma. That it seems in general, again, getting to this verse that I think we did, but we'll just redo it, where it says, "King, hear how in this world where one usually destroys the other, you can still have both the Dharma and a kingdom." Where you can understand this sort of one destroys the other as the Dharma and kingly rule being contradictory, but also referring to the kind of behavior that we see between various countries in the world, where we sort of have this practice of doing things that are not suitable back and forth to one another. So one might have the sense that it is impossible or contradictory to hold both the Dharma and ruling. And he says here, please listen to how they are not contradictory.
Oh yeah, that is enough.
So we will stop there for today as we're out of time.
Oh yeah.
Thank you, Genla Tutuche. And thank you, Katrina, for your clear translations. To people watching online, please have a look in the chat box for an opportunity to express our gratitude for our teacher and translator for the teachings that we've received so far. And we'll finish with some dedications.
May the spirit be on the sacred path, and those spiritual and to practice it have all right. May I pacify completely all outer hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teaching dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase. Tiram Guru Ramana due to despair, and may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Buddhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May the born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
아야,
도제나.
뭐야, 진짜. 도대체. 그래서,
Record.